Welcome to Bellinghistory with the Good Time Girls, a hyper-local podcast about the quirky history of Bellingham, Washington, and the fourth corner of these United States. Even though we like to keep things close to home, these stories are no less entertaining to the masses and those who find themselves, unfortunately, outside of the PNW. We are your hosts. I'm Ren.
And I'm Colby. We are known here in Bellingham as the Good Time Girls for our tour business, serving up hot Belling history since 2011. Today's episode is called Tattoos.
Tattoos!
We don't have a name.
Tattoos.
Really. It's about tattoos. Tattoo tales. We just did taxidermy tales, though. I don't know. About history of getting inked in Bellingham.
Yeah. There's got to be like a fun Discovery Channel show we could make fun of. We missed that opportunity though.
Oh yeah, what are those called?
Inked, I think is one.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Bellingham Inked.
Bellingham Inked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And then there's some cool metal music in the background.
All right, Ren, do you have any tattoos? You do.
Do I have tattoos?
I mean, I know you do.
Yeah, do I? And I'm looking for more. Wink, wink. Yeah, I got some tats.
What's your favorite one?
I got some
Tell
tats.
Us about one.
Ooh, my favorite.
Or, latest, most interesting.
I got my first tattoo when I was 15 on my dad's friend's couch.
Oh boy.
I know.
Was it a stick and poke or an electric?
No, it was, might as well have been because he had no idea how to use the machine.
Sure.
It was a little fairy lady. Actually, it was not little. It was actually pretty big.
big.
It was 5 inches tall on my ankle. Not little. Not dainty.
Yeah.
And I got it out of, gamer nerds don't come for me, but it was I can't remember what Zelda was out at the time. It was a newer Zelda. Yeah. And my brother is a big gamer and he had the playthrough book. Back in the day, children, there were books that told you all of the things to go and look for,
tricks and tips.
Yeah, and so I found her in there. But anyway, she was huge, and it was just this very janky black outline of a little fairy lady. Okay. But then I was 15, so then I went to school, and all my friends thought I was really cool.
Yeah. 15.
Because I was. And, but also, then I would let them all color it in when we were all bored. So,
that's fun.
Every day I had a new
cool,
fun little marker. It was a little coloring book. So
that's kind of fun.
It's kind of cool.
I know. I'm really glad I didn't get any of the tattoos I wanted to get in high school when I was 15.
What would you have gotten?
I remember wanting an ankh.
Ooh,
on my ankle.
Cool.
Ankh on the ankle.
Yes.
Egyptian symbol. And why? I don't know.
It's like the people that got the Okapele.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So many people with that little guy.
Yeah. There was some stupid ideas. And then, So I amazingly have none. So
I know. How did you do it?
I don't know because everyone I was around was constantly getting tattooed.
I know. Stick and pokes too.
Facial tattoos, the whole bit.
Yeah.
But I
gutter punk
never
got
one. And at some point it just kind of became okay, that's my thing.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't know. I just was anyway, we have witnessed what seems like to me a tattoo explosion in my lifetime, at least. It's so kind of commonplace now. And I was actually trying to look up stats, and I saw that according to the American Academy of Dermatology, that in 1979 there were 300 tattoo parlors in the United States.
Yeah, that's not
I'm sure there were more on the down low.
Oh yeah, they were people's couches.
Still, there were, by 2001, there were more than 4,000, which is still not
as many as you would think. But 2001 is the beginning, yeah.
The most current stats I could find was 2023. There are more than 25,000 tattoo artists, businesses. So this is registered business. So
exponential.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I wonder how many are in Bellingham now alone.
I was trying to look. There's over a dozen. There's
so many that I don't even know of. There's
I know,
people
I
that
can't
have their
keep
own
track
studios
anymore.
now. You can rent your own just little bitty
And I know
thing.
some of the
It's
ones
cool.
that have been around for a long time, and we'll come back to those at the end. But
yeah,
because we are talking about Bellingham history today.
That's right.
But we need some.
But first, we gotta get some tattoo 101
context.
If you're not aware, tattoos are a form of body modification made by inserting ink, dyes, and or pigments into the dermis layer of the skin to form a design. This is usually done with some kind of sharp implement, either a hand tool or an electric, quote-unquote, gun. Designs can be decorative or symbolic. I'm just going to go ahead and put in that I know some tattoo artists. If you're calling it a gun, then you are some janky-ass shit doing tattoos on your couch in your kitchen.
What do you call it now?
Yeah, so artisans refer to it as a machine.
Tattoo machine.
If you want to be like a legit tattooist.
I'm old.
I know. I learned this recently. Shout out to Autumn at Honey Salon. We are, and Max, her partner. Yeah. I have a lot of dirty tattoos from a gun.
Yeah.
I'm hoping for more machine-based. You all know. They can serve different purposes. Getting a tattoo has historically been like a rite of passage. They can be marks of status or rank, religious symbols, decorations for bravery, pledges of love. They can be for protection, like a lucky charm. And then they can also be used as identifiers. Before ID, people often got their own name tattooed on themselves in case they ended up dead, or as a way of marking prisoners or slaves. So that's the interesting part.
And awful.
And awful.
We'll get into it. Because, I mean, there was an ID. Like, you didn't have a picture ID. You
didn't have a picture ID, or fingerprints weren't
nothing.
really
They didn't even really have birth certificates, nothing. It was just like...
markers.
Who are you?
Yeah, he's got a mole on his
Joe.
left butt cheek.
But
if
you're a sailor and you go overboard and you wash ashore... It's the tattoos that are going to identify you.
Oh no, this might be inspiration for my next one. So tattoos are a very old art form, but have in different places and times been more or less culturally acceptable, as we know here in the U.S. We know from archaeological finds that Neolithic peoples had tattoos. Ötzi, is that how you say it?
I am not sure what...
Ötzi, the Iceman found in the Alps in 1991, born... He was born somewhere around 3,275 BC, had 61 tattoos.
How many people do you think now have those tattoos? I bet it's a lot. They're I want the Iceman's.
Fucking Ötzi. Kind of want one now too. This is very inspiring. So in terms though of European history, it seems like pretty much no one had them in the medieval period or the Renaissance period. Mostly probably because of the rise of Christianity. And then there's that Old Testament prohibitions against marking one's flesh. Leviticus 19:28. Do not cut your bodies for the dead or print any marks upon you. I am the Lord. Why doesn't he have bigger fish to fry? Honestly.
I mean, they were just trying to be like, don't be pagan.
Don't be a pagan. Abrahamic religions aside, tattooing was practiced in many, many cultures around the globe. The word tattoo comes from the Samoan word tatau, meaning, meaning to strike. So when the age of sail happened, people, or mostly European colonizers, started sailing all around the world. Sailors who hailed from all kinds of places also began collecting art from the places they visited as kinds of souvenirs. The tattoos showed the places they had been as well as their accomplishments and heritage, and also functioned as good luck charms. So in the U.S., tattoos were commonplace in the U.S. Navy during as far back as the American Revolution. Tattoos were used by sailors and soldiers as ID, as we mentioned before, in case of death, and then as symbols of bravery and patriotism.
Yeah, I actually found this little tidbit description from a novel that was published by a guy named Wilbur Hinman, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Ohio Infantry, about tattooing during the Civil War that I thought was kind of cool, so I'll just read it. Every regiment had its tattooers, with outfits of needles and India ink. who for a consideration decorated the limbs and bodies of their comrades with flags, muskets, cannons, sabers, and an infinite variety of patriotic emblems and warlike and grotesque devices. Thousands of the soldiers had their name, regiment, and residence pricked into their arms or legs. It was like writing one's own epitaph, but the custom prevented many bodies from being buried in unknown graves. So there you go. So, yeah, common amongst sailors, the military, just for those reasons, obviously. But I thought it was interesting. I saw a tattoo artist who was interviewed in the 1920s. He claimed that there were no sailors that did not have tattoos. And if there were, he would know about it. And I don't know if that's true.
Could have been, yeah.
But I do wonder if it was sort of a rite of passage for sailors. Like, if you didn't have tattoos, maybe
you
that
were
was...
sissy.
Yeah, and like unlucky and
yeah, right.
So it was just such a huge part of that culture. And I actually saw that during World War II, I saw statistics that said 65% of Navy sailors were estimated to have tattoos. So that's kind of interesting. The Navy also tried to enforce rules at times and like made them like get the naked boobies covered and stuff like that. So,
I love that.
Yeah, so other than sailors, soldiers, circus performers, and outlaws, tattooing in the United States especially was pretty taboo for most people. It was something to keep hidden if you wanted a job or to be considered respectable.
Yeah.
But speaking of regulations and the law, there weren't really a lot. It was mostly just social taboos and pressures.
Just keeping you down.
Yeah. But I did find out that after hepatitis scares in New York City in the 1960s,
that'll do it.
They outlawed it, or tattoo parlors were banned, and that wasn't reversed until the 1990s.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Which is wild. I think New York City, which was like tattoo ground zero for the United States.
So. Oh, for sure. And then for 30 years.
Yeah. It's wild.
It just went underground.
We do have regulations now, mostly around safety and health and sanitation.
Yes, which is good.
Yeah, and it's also illegal to tattoo a minor in all states now. But it
Except
varies.
for on your couch.
Yeah,
and your buddies.
A lot of things vary from state to state around tattooing and piercing. So there was a whole like spreadsheet on Wikipedia. So I was like, okay, well, good to know. Check out whatever state you're in. Also, that there weren't really great ways to get tattoos removed. I just want to point this out. Like we have laser removal now, which still is a whole ordeal.
I've heard 20 times as painful as the tattoo itself.
But it sounds way better than some of the things they were touting to do.
Just like cutting out chunks of flesh.
Yeah. It was essentially either just acid doing things that were going to scar. There were these elaborate things involving, I don't know, colloidal silver. And just weird stuff. Like, it was like... I didn't even... Some of it sounded like, I don't know if this would even work. And then other things sounded like...
It sounds about right.
It sounds like you're just going to have a bunch of scar tissue. Chemical
burn. I think I'd rather have the naked lady.
I mean, scarification could be cool. But, I mean...
Friends.
Do not try this at home.
Colby's getting ideas. She doesn't have any tattoos, but there might be some badass scarification
I've
coming.
I've done some other body modifications.
Okay. We're going to revisit that in our piercing episode. The history of piercing. Oh, you vey. Okay, so some well-known early...
It was the 90s.
Because it was the 90s. Yeah, we were in piercing in the 90s. We were... Early well-known tattooists in the USA were back in New York City, as we mentioned, ground zero, such as Martin Hildebrand, a former Civil War sailor who is credited with being one of the first to focus on sterilization of equipment and to customize designs for clients. A contemporary of his was Edwin, or Ned Thomas, who was a real Lower East Side character, who had also been a professional thief, did a lot of prison time. While out of prison, he was interviewed by press and versions of that appeared syndicated in many newspapers during the 1880s. So we have a little excerpt here from 1886 interview in the New York Journal titled "Tattooing: How the Business is Carried On in New York. On South Street, where many ships from all over the world lie at the wharves, there is an old man who for 32 years has been busy from morning till night tattooing people. He tattoos about 3,000 persons every year. This curious artist, Professor Thomas, is a genial elderly man and wears spectacles. He began life as a sailor and followed the sea for 12 years. He learned the art of tattooing on board ship, and 32 years ago, when his time was out in the Navy, he came to New York and set up in business as a tattoo artist. Many of his customers are sailors who have anchors and stars, clipper ships, and goddesses of liberty, and crosses tattooed on their arms. He says, however, that most of his customers at the present time are city people, such as yachtsmen and traveling businessmen, who have their name tattooed so that they may be identified in case of accident or death. Professor Thomas has 500 different designs. For making an anchor on a sailor's arm, he charges 25 cents. Today's dollars, that's about $8. A goddess of liberty and the stars and stripes cost $2.50, or $80-ish. Other designs cost from $1 to $15. That's $30 to $500-ish.
That seems about reasonable.
That's kind of where we're at now. But the $8 one for an anchor?
Cheapo.
I know.
Sweet.
He's just making his like daily bread, you know, with the
doing a little flash.
Little flash. And then in the article, Thomas also said he helped to tattoo Captain Constantinus the Greek, a tattooed man of the circus. Thomas said he had been, quote, put to work by Mr. Barnum to more amply illustrate him. The article described that there were currently, at that time, 6 tattooed men and 5 tattooed women in the country. Professor Thomas receives from $175 to $250. This would be equivalent to tens of thousands of dollars for now for tattooing people for the sideshows and circuses. It takes him 6 weeks working from 3 to 6 hours a day to fully illustrate a tattooed man. That's a fucking gig. And the fact that they're just shelling out money like, we need a tattooed man. We don't have a tattooed man.
Yeah, all the circuses had to have one.
That's crazy.
And I mean, think of how just scandalous it was, because that tattooed person, to see them at a circus, you're looking at some flesh.
Some skin.
Some skin.
That's true.
Which carries its own level of scandal.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, the tattoos, it's almost that they're not wearing clothes. That's
more alluring.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. I guess I never thought of that.
Yeah. So they'd be in a little tent, you know, because you couldn't just be standing out. So George Constantinus, the Greek, the alleged Greek, he was one of the first tattooed person sideshow acts. Mm-hmm. And he was exhibited by P.T. Barnum as early as 1876 in the circus and was making quite a bit of money. And he had this whole elaborate backstory about being captured and tattooed as punishment in Burma. All the tattooed people had these wild, exotic stories, and other tattoo artists besides Thomas also claimed to have worked on the Greek. And many of them said, no, he's not Greek at all. One said he was Italian. One did vouch for him having Burmese tattoos. Yeah. But so they said that wasn't done as like torture. And so he's probably just a sailor, you know?
But, he got some cool ones.
Yeah. But the circuses, they really latched onto this sensation. So one thing that really helped boost the numbers of tattooed sideshow people was the invention of the electric tattoo pen. Yeah. So it wasn't a gun.
It wasn't a gun. It was a pen.
It was a pen. So Thomas Edison.
Oh, that one.
The guy with the electricity. He had been trying to invent a way to use electricity to copy documents and drawings at high speed. So it's his electric pen that fuels all this. So he makes this electric pen, because, documents, you need to make copies for business and law and government. So he's working on that, and he patented this motor-driven pen thing in 1875 that would eventually, soon after, be replaced by the mimeograph, which I don't know exactly how those work, but like prototype to a copy. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that kind of stuff. Yeah, tattoo guys start being like, hey, that could work for us. And in 1891, Samuel O'Reilly was granted a patent for the first, what we think is the first tattooing machine.
Nice.
So there's not a lot of information about him, but Charles Wagner is a pretty famous tattoo artist, and he was reportedly trained by O'Reilly and took over his shop, and then also patented his own upgraded version of that in 1904. And he worked in the Bowery for over 50 years. So those pens, tattoo guns, whatever they are, machines, tattooing, electric tattoo, that made it faster and more efficient to do that full body coverage to get those circus people ready to go out and be on the sideshow. And Charlie Wagner was said to have tattooed more than 50 attractions during his career, including his own brother Stephen Wagner. And side note, we're going to talk about a Bellingham tattoo artist who purchased equipment by mail and corresponded with Charles Wagner quite a bit. Charles Wagner does not appear to be related in any way to the other Wagners of tattoo fame. Do you remember Maud Wagner from the first Good Time Girls tours?
Yeah.
So Maud and Gus Wagner, and we used to talk about them on the early versions of Sin and Gin tours.
Gus Wagner was born in 1872 Ohio, and allegedly when he was a young boy, he saw Captain Constantinus, the Greek, in the circus, which made an impression, apparently. In 1897, Gus became a merchant seaman. After he returned to the U.S., he set up a tattoo shop and worked as a tattooed man in a circus sideshow. There was an exhibit at the South Street Seaport Museum in New York that featured his flash designs and instruments, as well as a 500-page scrapbook, which has photographs, sketches, postcards, press clippings, and so much more.
It's so cool. We'll link to that because there's some websites that have pictures from the exhibit, and his scrapbook is the coolest thing. As a scrapbook enthusiast, I was into it.
Gus met Maud Stevens while on the vaudeville circuit at the World's Fair in Louisiana in 1904. Maud was born in 1877 in Kansas and was an aerialist and contortionist who worked in a bunch of different traveling circuses. The story was that she agreed to go on a date with him in exchange for a lesson in tattooing. Maud is often referred to as the first female tattoo artist in the U.S. I love her.
When I first started doing the Good Time Girls tours and I saw the picture of her that they used on the tours, I was like, because what she has on her chest is a woman riding a lion, and then there's like another lion kind of behind. But it was like the picture of what I was like thinking.
That's amazing.
I know. So maybe I'll just get a big old chest tattoo.
Yeah.
So
that is amazing.
But, like,
yeah, no, that's awesome.
I love her tattoos. Anyway, most of them. Some of them are kind of weird patriotic things. But that was this thing.
Gus and Maud eventually had a daughter, Lotiva.
I have no idea.
Lotteva. She was born in 1910. She reportedly started tattooing at the age of 9. Her mother wouldn't allow her to get tattooed herself. Later, after her father's death, her mother relented, but she decided she didn't want to get tattooed by anyone other than her father. Aw, that's pretty cool. So Gus had died in 1941, Maud in 61, and Lotiva in 1993. And she died without any tattoos because her dad died.
Have any. Yeah, because he was deceased.
But she gave lots.
Yeah, she was a tattoo artist by hand still, I think.
By hand, yeah.
Time. Okay, but we need to get into our Bellingham stories. In terms of the history of indigenous tattooing in this area, it's pretty difficult to come by any information. So I saw that MoPop, the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle, had recently done an exhibit on tattoo history in the Pacific Northwest. It was called Body of Work, and they had invited Sasha LaPointe, who is a writer and poet of Nooksack and Upper Skagit tribes, and she was recently here in Bellingham because Whatcom Reads featured her book Red Paint. But she was invited as someone who has a lot of tattoos and is an enthusiast and is indigenous to curate stories of tattoos amongst Coast Salish tribes. And she said in an interview that she found that the Coast Salish tribes were not as focused as other tribes in the greater region, or if they had been, the practices were lost in the process of colonization and assimilation. But she did have some stories of puberty rituals involving tattoos of circles using blackberry ink and quills. And yeah, I did notice tattooing was huge amongst northern tribal groups like Haida, Tlingit, Inuit. Also well documented among California tribes with a lot of similarities of what they did, like lion tattoos on the chin or puberty-related tattoos, signs of status, that kind of thing. So, I mean, it seems plausible with cultural overlap between all those regions. There could have been something going on, but I've never found any mentions among early descriptions of tattoos, specifically by the white dudes who wrote stuff down back in the day about, say, the Lummi or Nooksack or other groups in the area. There's a lot of mentioning of face painting and other forms of body adornment and modification. They made a big deal about the head flattening practices that was common among a lot of Northwest Coast tribes. But remember that some of the first non-Indigenous people that arrived here and spent any amount of time were missionaries. And of course, they were going to try to suppress a lot of those cultural practices that they saw as not desirable.
Yeah. because the God said
King
James.
King James Bible. Mm-hmm. So fast forward, though, to post-1903 when we have a city on the bay named after the bay, and that is Bellingham. And I just want to chime in at how difficult researching tattoos has been, because I have researched all kinds of weird fringe elements and people and things that are challenging to research, but this has actually been probably the most challenging thing. It can be very difficult to get out what was going on locally based on the paper trail of records, because tattoo artists did not really advertise much, suffice to say, in the newspaper or get listed in city directories. They moved around a lot. Yada yada, and the taboo around it. You know, bigger port towns obviously had the tattoo shops, and you could kind of find stuff about them, but even those are real hard to research. So we did have a fairly high volume of sailors and drunk ruffians, so it seemed logical
you would think,
that there was some tattooing going on here. Yeah. And so I have randomly stumbled across some things over time, so we're going to talk about it. A lot of things in the newspapers would just be, if you're keyword searching for tattoo, you're just going to get a lot of the like, this exotic tribe from insert exotic place here and their weird exotic rituals. A lot of those kind of just syndicated pieces, and a lot of like stories about tattooed men and the circus. Sure. So they're just sort of these generic, you know, stories and not necessarily local. So it can be really like hunting for a needle in a haystack, a tattoo needle, if you will. But some of the early mentions I found were when people would wash up, guess what, and need to be identified, their dead body.
Yeah, putting that in there.
Yeah. So there was one interesting one where this guy had mysteriously disappeared from his home in Bellingham. It was in late 1903 he disappeared, and then in 1904 a corpse was found in a Seattle shack that was believed to be him. His name was Jacob Lernsbury, and he was proprietor of the Thistle Saloon and Restaurant down on Old Town on Holly and C. And when he had disappeared, he had written a letter to his wife and was like, my business is in trouble. I've gone off to try to find some money. And she was like, the letter is incoherent. He was drinking a lot. She was worried he had like offed himself. The man found in the shack had these tattoo marks, as they described them, the right forearm, a star and an anchor done in colors, and the initials JAL, which were his initials.
Yeah.
And so people were like, yeah, that's got to be him. But guess what? It was not him.
That's so wild.
And yeah, he was alive and well and reunited with his family, and he didn't die till 1931.
That's so crazy. Who was the other guy?
Don't know.
Wild.
But another time, another body had washed up in the Ferndale area. It was believed to be a sailor, again, because of the tattoos. And there had been a storm, and it had been very windy. And they were like, he probably fell overboard. He'd only been dead, 8 or 10 hours, they thought. And so I just love reading the descriptions of what they had tattooed.
Yeah.
So it says, tattooed on his right shoulder was a large red rose in full bloom and 2 buds of the same flower. On the forearm, a coat of arms with flags borne by an American eagle. On the left shoulder, the name Shanghai was written beneath a large butterfly finished in colors of the type used by tattoo artists of the Orient.
Those are cool tattoos. Roses and a fucking butterfly.
So classic.
Love him.
I know. And that's honestly one of my favorite parts of the prison records. Because they tell all their like moles and marks and includes all their tattoos. And I love to read them.
That's rad. So we found an article in 1905 that was really emphasizing why you might regret getting a tattoo. It was about a vaudevillian named Thomas Ray, who was a professional singer living in Portland at the time. Ray had performed in Bellingham previously at the Edison Unique Theater. Photos show him to be quite handsome and dashing. He was born in England, had been in the Navy, and became a vaudevillian in the U.S. He was 27 at the time of the article. The story proclaimed that he had lost...
It says literally $3 million.
$3 million.
Which
that's not...
I don't...
That's very bizarre. Okay. That he had lost $3 million because his prospective mother-in-law objected to his tattoos after she got a glimpse of him on his way to the bathroom when his robe fell open.
Yeah, so I think it was like he was going to marry someone who was going to inherit like a pile of money.
She was
But the
loaded.
heiress's mother was like, I saw his tattoos.
Some tattoos. Interesting. So this screams, clickbait, fake news, but great publicity for Thomas Ray because I really want to see those tattoos now.
I know. I'm like, I want to go see him.
Yeah.
At the Edison Theater.
At the Edison, yeah. Tell us about your mother-in-law. But it goes into detail about his tattoos, which are pretty interesting and presumably real. So it said that in South America and in foreign harbors, the sailor lad picked up these souvenirs of a seaman's life. The designs on Ray's body cover both arms and his chest. On his right forearm on the upper side is a sailor on duty at the wheel with the Union Jack behind it, done by a sailor in the English Navy. Across his breast is a 3-masted full-rigged ship under full sail. The breakers are rolling under the ship's bow and the canvas is stretched by a favoring breeze. That's a hell of an explanation. It was done by a professional in the Bowery of New York with an electric needle. Maybe we know who that was. The left bicep, a picture of Grace Darling, the heroic daughter of the longshore lighthouse keeper, made from photographs with a frame of an anchor and a life belt. He also had his initials in fancy colors, the sun, flowers, and a friendship design with a heart.
So cute.
That's very cute. Who's Grace Darling?
She was the heroic daughter of the longshore lighthouse keeper.
Okay.
No,
yep.
This is her.
Is she famous?
Yeah, she was kind of like someone from England, and she rescued survivors of a shipwreck.
Oh, so she's kind of like a saint.
She's like, figure for the sailor boys.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then we got 1914 and the Tattooed Bandit. So there was big news in April of 1914 when an outlaw nicknamed the Tattooed Bandit was captured in neighboring Skagit County. The Bellingham Herald published a photo captioned, "First photograph of Charles Hopkins, Tattooed Bandit, wearer of the brand of Cain." Just another biblical reference. They wrote, "Charles Hopkins, known variously as the Tattooed Bandit or the True Love Bandit, and the wearer of the brand of Cain, is alleged to be the worst murderer that ever terrorized Northwest Washington. He was photographed after being led from his cell on Wednesday afternoon. His face shows no evidence of fright and is almost without a mark of emotion. In his chin is a deep depression and a furrow above his eyes has been designated by police officers as the brand of Cain."
What, his eyebrow wrinkle?
Yeah, wait. So
forehead
are they
wrinkle.
saying that he looks like...
He's handsome. There's many pictures of him.
Brand of Cain. That's so interesting.
But he's marked by the devil, clearly, because he's killing people.
He's killing people, but he's got that low forehead. You know, people... We talked about that previously.
Probably got a lumpy head.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Phrenology.
Hopkins had the letters True Love tattooed on his fingers, thus the nicknames, and also making him easily identified. I love that.
The downside of the tattoos when you're trying to run from the law.
It's true. You're like the only one that's got identifying markers. Hopkins was arrested on March 31st, 1914 in a rooming house in Skagit County on 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. A manhunt for the bandit had been ongoing since February. Hopkins had been born in England, and according to his romantic story, he ran away and went to sea at the age of 9. Allegedly, while working on board ship, he fell in love with a captain's daughter whose name was Ethel. Thus, he had that name tattooed on his right wrist, entwined with vines, flowers, and butterflies. He also had her likeness tattooed on his right arm, and of course the knuckle tats, expressing his true love for Ethel.
I'm like, when he was 9, he fell in love with Ethel
I know.
on the boat? I'm so confused.
Maybe he was on there for a while.
Yeah. Also, he's probably just telling some embellished tales. But
yeah. So, obviously, big news. Many papers reported the story, and part of the appeal was the romanticized image of this guy. With true love tattoos, he was handsome and a snappy dresser. The Oregonian quipped that he should have gotten sure death tattooed on his knuckles instead of true love. He was convicted of first-degree murder in June and sentenced to life. The death penalty had been abolished just the year before. He got lucky, but he later died at Walla Walla State Penitentiary at the age of 60 in 1948.
I also went down a whole dive trying to find out about the knuckle tattoos because we got Hold Fast is like the sailor classic.
That's good.
So that's like good luck for sailors, and it's going to keep you
safe
hanging on those ropes and things. Yeah, and then of course Love Hate is culturally one that I always think of. And I was like, where'd that originate from?
Yeah.
And all I could find was, so that was popularized by Robert Mitchum's character in the movie Night of the Hunter from 1955, which I haven't watched but is now at the top of my list because it looks good. But he plays like a preacher serial killer with love-hate on his knuckles in that movie. I know, and it's like black and white. It looks amazing. But so it was based on a book, and the character in the book did have that. And so it was definitely like a thing before even that. Then, yeah. And I did actually find in a newspaper, not from Bellingham, of course, but there was an article about a criminal who had that on his knuckles in Iowa in 1916. Oh. So clearly
1916.
It had been a thing.
It's been a while.
So I don't know who was the first love-hate.
So
but
good.
Everyone pause now and go listen to the song Death or Glory by The Clash. Anyway, then speaking of that song, I found a mention in 1936 of an outlaw identified by his Death or Glory tattoo on his left arm. Ooh. He had been critically wounded by a bullet from his own gun. Apparently, he was in a shootout with immigration officers in Blaine, and he tried to, like, shoot over his shoulder, and he somehow shot himself in the head.
Oh, so definitely death, not glory.
Yeah, so he was taken to St. Luke's Hospital here in Bellingham.
Oh, fuck.
And they were like, he's probably going to die. Then they were like, no, we think he's going to live. And they transferred him to Seattle. And then he died, so.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Wait, what year was that?
1930s.
Oh, wow.
I know. So death or glory, indeed. It was death. But let's talk about getting tattooed in Bellingham. Yeah. Because I found an advertisement in the newspaper in 1906 for a Professor Johnson. It's kind of misspelled. It's got like bad spelling. It's kind of a janky ad. But I think it's supposed to say expert. It's misspelled. It just says XRT.
I like it.
With like some gaps. And anyway, electric tattoo artist. And it says, I make a specialty of fixing up amateur work. I use all colors that are a possibility. Prices 25 cents and up. Joker Bar, 1307 Dock Street, opposite Beck Theater. So that is 25 cents, first of all, is roughly the equivalent of somewhere between $10 and $20.
That's not bad.
And the Joker Bar on Dock Street there, so that was Cornwall Avenue.
Sounds like the shadiest fucking name for a bar. The Joker Bar in 1906?
Bar. Right. I know. They didn't have Batman yet, but
no,
they did have playing cards.
Yes. Still, just sounds like...
It is... It does sound sketchy. So that had been previously the Prosper Saloon, for which we have a little fun booklet with the limericks in it.
Yeah.
So that's basically right next to Chuckanut Bay Distillery on Cornwall today. It's right near where the Wild Oat and the Doggy place is, right there.
I love the Doggy place, yeah.
So, yeah, it became known as the Joker Bar, and... There's a description of the Joker Bar in the form of a poem.
Okay, good.
In 1907. Shall I read it?
Yeah, please, please, please.
So Collip and Monaghan, so those are the proprietors. May have heard of Monaghan from over there in Fairhaven. Collip and Monaghan invite all their friends to call, for they have the choicest liquors and enough for all. They've imported wines and brandies from nearly every clime. They guarantee the bluegrass bourbon to please you every time.
Yeah.
They have other brands of whiskey that they consider good. The Sunnybrook Rye and the Woodford Country Club. That rhymes with good.
Yeah.
They patronize home people and sell the 3B beer. If you want to get it fresh, you can always get it here. You will find this place is always kept nice and neat. And from Beck's Fine Theater is just across the street. That's what it says.
That's what it says.
And you can get a tattoo from Professor Johnson.
Yes! For fucking $2.
So note
get it.
that he's probably just passing through or staying in town for a little while, and the bar's like, sure, you can do some tattoos out of our bar.
Shady fucking Joker Bar. Got a guy at the back table.
I want to know who went to the Joker Bar, got their amateur work fixed up by Professor Johnson.
It was like a pop-up shop.
Get a nice panther. So I really tried to figure out who this Professor Johnson was, and Johnson, being a very terribly common name, made it a little bit harder. But I do believe it possibly may have been this guy named George W. Johnson, whom I stumbled across while researching this next story. So this story is about a girl named Dolly Johnson, who's from Anacortes. And I was like, hey, another Johnson. Weird, but lots of Johnsons.
Tattooed Johnson.
You know, Scandinavians, lots of them around here.
Sure.
So in 1909, the Herald reported that Dolly Johnson, a 16-year-old girl of Anacortes who came to the city last week for the purpose of performing a stunt with the company that opened a carnival here today, was sent back to her home yesterday by D.P. Day, manager of the Associated Charities in this city. The girl had her arms tattooed and said that she was going to stay with the carnival company for only a short time. Manager Day, however, decided that she was too young for such performances and placed her on a boat bound for Anacortes. The Johnson girl has been in Bellingham before, according to Manager Day. Up to trouble, no doubt. So they apparently sent her home. Dolly Johnson was listed back in Anacortes with her widowed mother and younger sister in 1910, and then her trail went cold, and I was like, she probably ran off with the circus again.
Yep.
But you know who else was listed in that census record in their household was an uncle whose name was George Johnson.
Yes.
And then when I looked at the 1920 census just to see what he was up to, he was listed in Seattle, and his occupation was given as tattoo artist. And I was like, maybe he's Professor Johnson.
Yeah.
Not only that, he probably tattooed his
16-year-old niece.
His 16-year-old niece. Creepy.
I don't know, not creepy. She's getting her money.
She's like, come on, Uncle George.
Please, yeah. Gotta go run away with the circus. I mean, are you saying that you wouldn't have done that?
No, I 100%
exactly.
would have. But he died of tuberculosis not long after in a Seattle hospital, so that ended his tattoo career.
He did live a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. But so weirdly, Dolly's sister Myrtle got married and moved to Bellingham around 1920, and she lived here her whole life, leaving quite a number of descendants. And I recognized a few names, and I reached out, but unfortunately, what I gathered from the person I talked to was that due to the stigma around tattoos, it was really hush-hush, and all anyone knew was that there had been a tattooed lady in the family, and she may have married a tattoo artist, but no one really talked about it, and it was kind of a, embarrassing, stigma around it, so.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. They didn't know what happened to Dolly, but she probably, if she was off with the circus, going under a performing stage name or something.
I love it.
I know.
Dolly.
Aww. But so, what do you think of Oregon Ben here?
I love Oregon Ben. Oregon Ben is so cool. Okay, let's talk about his tats.
Yes.
He's got the later Lady Liberty looks like maybe with the flag.
Yeah, I wrote down what I think it says there.
Yeah, and it says we think it says in this very cool little
it's like a scroll
banner
thing. Yeah.
Underneath it says, "Where liberty dwells, there is my home." Colby knows that it's hard to read, possibly misspelled, but the quote "Where liberty dwells, there is my country" is a quote widely cited on the internet as a Ben Franklin quote. He also has nautical stars. It's like the North Star, navigating as a sailor. There's a lot of them, and they're very fucking cool. And then he's got many, many, many others. Looks like a lady
lots of flags,
pin
which
up.
I can't really tell what they all are, but I'm assuming flags of places he's been. I think I see Japan.
Yeah. This is found in the Warwick collection at the Whatcom Museum Photo Archives, which is the publicity photographs of the vaudevillians collected by James Warwick, who worked in Bellingham theaters for over 50 years. In this collection, there's a photo of a shirtless tattooed man, and printed on it are the words, "Oregon Ben," tattooed by Professor H. Spitzer on the back. It read, "Tattooed in 7 colors, 500 beautiful designs, private exhibitions," and the address of a photo studio in Seattle. So Colby did some digging on Oregon Ben, and unfortunately couldn't find anything specific to his appearance in Bellingham, but it would seem he must have been a part of a vaudeville show or circus that came to town. Also couldn't find any information about Oregon Ben himself. I imagine that was a hard one to research.
But his last name.
Yeah. We know he was connected with prominent tattoo artists of the P&W, including Professor Spitzer, as per the photograph. He was Hugo Jules Spitzer. He was born in 1871, died in 1942. He tattooed around the Pacific Northwest in the early 1900s, including in Vancouver, BC, Seattle, and Portland. One article from a Vancouver paper described Hugo Spitzer, the tattoo artist, had a dingy studio a few doors south of Melbourne Hotel. He was a real artist in his own media and had a large clientele of deep-sea men from all over the world. Hugo was kept busy pricking intricate designs on brawny arms and chests. Spitzer was tattooing in Seattle in around 1905. He had a couple of different locations, including one on 2nd Avenue near Pioneer Square. When he relocated to Portland around 1910, he sold his Seattle shop to George Washington Kruger, a student who tattooed his way through university. And Kruger partnered with good old Oregon Ben. According to an interview with Kruger, Ben apparently was, quote, a bit shaky with needles, and so would stand behind Kruger and give him directions. What became of Oregon Ben is unclear, but Kruger was a Seattle mainstay until his death in 1971. He just stood behind him and said...
He was like, and make that...
Okay, that one?
Yeah.
Good.
put a little rose right there. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Ben.
But I don't know if we didn't mention this, but if you haven't noticed that all these tattoo artists are either called professor.
Yeah.
Once again.
Yeah.
We saw this with our taxidermy guy. So again, I think it's just like because they're an artiste. Uh-huh. They get that honorific...
They're a professional, so they're a professor.
Designation. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so
I like it.
They're either called Professor so-and-so or they're called Sailor. Sailor Carl, Sailor Joe, Sailor Jim.
Good to know.
Yeah. Also, okay, so the one tattoo artist who actually lived in Bellingham for any long period of time, finally, here we are.
Get one.
I know. Fred Marquand. I have to thank Facebook for this because there are some groups and forums I lurk around on for Bellingham history tidbits, and some descendants of Fred posted about him in one of these groups, and turns out an entire book has been done about Fred by a tattoo artist and history enthusiast, Nick Ackman, who formerly lived in Bellingham for around 6 years and now is the co-owner of the Pittsburgh Tattoo Art Museum in Pennsylvania.
Very cool.
Needless to say, I immediately got a copy, and this book it's sort of a weird, obscure thing, but I will link to it in case you are interested because it's a very cool book. I ordered it kind of without knowing what it was going to be like on the inside. You could only see the cover on the internet, but it is beautiful. It has all his flash and color photos, and it's really cool.
It's very well done, yeah.
And,
cool.
And it had a good chunk of Fred's history, so it was like a lot of research I didn't have to
do
myself. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks to Nick.
Fred Marquand was born in Asotin County, Washington in 1905, and his family was French-Canadian via Wisconsin, which same as me.
I know they're French-Canadians.
Yeah. Well, his dad's side was part, one branch of it was. But the family moved to Bellingham in 1913, and Fred attended the Roeder Elementary School, and his family had saved a little art book from when he was a schoolboy that show a lot of his little drawings and his skills.
So
at
cool.
age 11.
It's really neat.
And Fred, like other Bellingham kids of the era, hung around the waterfront and witnessed, sailors getting up to their shenanigans, including getting tattoos. There's a quote from Fred where he says, "I was brought up in an atmosphere of tattooing among Norwegian sailors and had my first tattoo work done when I was 12. I don't regret it at all, and it is a fascinating hobby." So he was also exposed to the tattooed men and women of the circuses that came through town, which were numerous. There were like 2 circuses a year.
That's true, yeah.
At least.
Oh, man.
So Fred gave himself his first tattoo at age 12.
Nice.
And he started creating flash soon after. So he's coming of age. It's World War I. There would have been a lot of, servicemen in town, very patriotic vibes going on. And then about 1922, he was about 17 or 18, he started ordering tattoo equipment and corresponding with various tattoo artists like Charles Wagner. And he set up a tattoo shop in his parents' house, which was at the corner of Bancroft and I Streets.
Nice.
The house is not there any
longer. Oh,
he got customers mostly through word of mouth, and he was the only tattooer in Bellingham and was well known by word of mouth by locals. And city directories, you will see his name with artists.
Ah, jeez.
So, Fred served in the Navy from 1923 to 1927 and continued tattooing in his spare time. There's a lot of surviving letters showing his correspondence with these other artists and the sideshow people that he had met and probably tattooed. One of those was a Sailor Carl, who was both a tattooed man and an artist. And he had come through Bellingham with the Levitt Brown Huggins circus several times. And through Sailor Carl, he became acquainted with Professor George Fosdick, a.k.a. Sailor George, who then became his mentor and was the artist who did Marquand's back piece, which was
fucking incredible.
A large guardian angel Fred had designed himself. It was reportedly done in one sitting, taking 8 hours to complete. And yeah, it's beautiful. So we will post a picture of it on our show notes also. Got some nice color in there.
It's so pretty.
I like the sort of fleur-de-lis embellishments.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, okay. During the 20s and 30s, Fred Marquand created and collected as many designs as he could. Tattooing in Bellingham wasn't going to pay the bills, and Fred worked various regular jobs, including at Morse Hardware Company. There are drawings in his collections done on the back of Morse Hardware Company receipts and stationery. During the mid-1930s, we found ads in the newspaper. This one's under the personal ads. It says, tattooing, removing social security numbers tattooed on Walt and Charlie's at 1223 Cornwall. So I guess Walt and Charlie's was a cafe and a beer parlor run by Walt Walters and our old friend Charlie Bornstein.
Remember?
Yeah.
Charlie? From the animals?
From the animals.
The kitty cats in the museum.
Oh, Charlie. He's a good guy. Everybody loved him.
I wonder if he had any tattoos.
I know. Maybe at least his social security number. Also upstairs was the Del Mar Hotel.
Brothel.
It's unclear who was doing the tattooing at Walt and Charlie's. Could it have been one of them? Fred Marquand was certainly likely candidate. Also, around this time, there was a funny article in the Herald when, quote, a tattooed man ran into a bit of trouble Friday afternoon with the Bellingham police when he attempted to display his physiological art gallery in a public place, choosing a mixed audience for the attempted exhibit. The man was Diedrich Rising, 42, a Norwegian sailor on the steamship Excelsior. He was taken to the police station and charged with drunken disorderly conduct when the pictures on various portions of his anatomy were voted decidedly out of order at a local beer parlor. Police officers stated the man is almost completely covered with tattooings. I love him, Diedrich. It was so funny. The police report indicates this occurred at the Pastime Pool Hall, which was at that time right next to the Walt and Charlie's.
Both of those are right across from the Leopold Hotel.
So it was it was a wild time down
where
there.
Was a bunch of brothels.
A bunch of brothels and some underground
and sailors getting drunk and showing
their
tattoos
down by the
in mixed company.
Mm-hmm. Fast times down there at Walt and Charlie's.
Fast times at the pastimes.
That's right. Also in 1937, the Herald reported immigration inspectors took into custody Forbes A. Hendry and his wife Jane at a rooming house. They said the former a circus tattoo man and the latter a midget known in the circus world as Princess Wee Jean. They said, quote, Hendry and his wife had been in Bellingham for several days, making allegedly false statements to join a circus. He has made numerous departures and re-entries into the United States, claiming to be a citizen by birth. The pair were taken to Seattle.
So yeah, I just dug into this one, and it's referring to Doc Forbes, one of the more famous early tattoo artists in Canada history. So Forbes worked near the Navy base in Victoria and then in Vancouver on Davie Street through the 1960s. There's actually a cool documentary made in 1964 by CBC called Diary of a Tattooist that features him. He passed away in 1980, but yeah, he had met Princess Wee Jean on the vaudeville circuit, and they were married about 1923 and toured all around. She lived to be 93 years old. But back to Fred Marquand, because he worked at Bellingham Marine Railway and Boat Building Company in 1941 and re-enlisted in the Navy. So he was about 36 years old. He had met his wife, Carolyn, at a local athletic club when they were paired up playing badminton. And she was reportedly charmed by him, but apprehensive about his tattoos. And when Fred was on leave in 1942, they were married. Fred served on the USS Titania and was nicknamed Pops. And reportedly, he told his wife he quit tattooing, but sneakily kept on doing tattoos. In 1944, he was dubbed Tattoo King of Pasco Naval Air Station. And according to the military newspaper The Skywriter, who also said, not only is Fred a walking art gallery, but he is also a world-recognized authority on the subject of tattooing. He designed all the artwork that covered his body and puts on most of it himself. After the war, Fred and his wife settled down and had a family, and he apparently mostly gave up tattooing. But his old shop at his parents' house remained set up with his flash on the walls for years, and his kids remembered seeing it.
Aww.
But he started doing leather craft, like carving handmade leather work with these elaborate, very similar designs. In the 1980s, he read an article in the Herald about a young college art student named Mitchell or Michael. Michelle, perhaps, DeWitt's, who had opened a small tattoo studio in his home. And Fred, looked him up, and they began hanging out and talking. And Fred, at this time, was in his 70s.
Aww.
And Michelle, or Mitchell, moved to San Francisco and started working for Lyle Tuttle, his famous tattoo artist there. And then in 1987, the Washington State Folk Life Council, I didn't know we had that, did this survey of folk art in Washington State, and someone had submitted his work as candidate for an art show. And they were like, your leather craft's cool, but we really like your tattoo flash. Can you put up some of that? So he got to do that right before he passed away the next year at age 83. And I heard that Faithful Tattoo here in Bellingham has some of Fred Marquand's flash designs. So that's up on State Street next to the Shakedown.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And so I think, we had kind of a mid-century slump, I think, due to everyone coming back from the war, and it's family values time, and everything got kind of conservative and conformist. So you get the bikers and the convicts and the punks and all that. But I really feel like there was a renaissance in the 1990s. And I was kind of looking at this because I'm like, some of these Bellingham studios have been around for a while.
Yeah.
And Kalamalka, which I think has changed hands. It's not the same people. And Chameleon Inc. started out in 97. It's Camden Chameleon. But I was looking at these, and 1993 was Kalamalka, which was opened by Clarissa Thornock in Sycamore Square at the time in Fairhaven.
Cool. Nice.
And then they moved over to Meridian Street, which I remember. And her mother, Letha, was the piercer.
Oh, man.
And so this is the thing about the 90s, is that these tattoo shops incorporated body piercing.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And it had been that whole, that modern primitive research book came out in 89. And now we kind of cringe and look at a lot of this as cultural appropriation. And some of the fashion is not aged so well. But I think at the time, everyone just wanted to be Mad Max, fucking road warriors and shit.
That's fair.
That was the vibe. But yeah, I remember it was 96. I got my tongue pierced at Kalamalka on Meridian.
Yeah, 96.
Yeah. And all the newspaper articles about these places in the 90s is all focused on the piercing. It's the tattooing is sort of old news, and this newfangled piercing phenomenon had everybody clutching their pearls.
Right? It's the trendy thing to do.
Yeah. So it almost made tattooing seem more normal or something.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that helped play into why
it's so normal.
It's gotten so normal.
That's true. Yeah. Good call.
I don't know. That's just my theory.
I love it.
But yeah, there was Old School, I think, opened around 2000. They've been around for a while. But I also found it real interesting that women were a big part of that. So those two first tattoo studios that opened in the 90s were women doing the tattooing and the piercing.
That is interesting.
And owning them. And, I mean, women have always been a part of the tattoo world, but often are overlooked. So there's lots other than Maud Wagner, who was considered the first. There was Mildred Hull of Manhattan, a.k.a. Millie, Queen of the Bowery. She was tattooed by Wagner. There was Lady B. Horton in Tacoma, who was said to be the only woman tattoo artist in the PNW in 1954. And then Seattle had Madame Lazonga.
Oh, I love that.
And she's regarded regarded by Seattle's quote-unquote first lady of tattoo. She started in the early 70s with Danny Danzel of the Seattle Tattoo Emporium, which calls itself America's oldest tattoo parlor still operating, having opened in 1941 in Seattle. So
wow, interesting.
they apparently have a whole bunch of like historical collections and things there. So got that on my list of things to visit.
Serious. That's very cool.
I know. But man, this got long, so what do you think?
I know. Wrapping it up. I mean, I told you my takeaway. It's just, having your name tattooed on your body so they could identify you. I think that's, I don't know why that.
Well, if you're a rambler and a roving,
probably better get your name
that's
tattooed on.
The traveling salesman.
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't have any more takeaways. I don't know.
That was a long one. We took away all the things.
I know.
We took them all.
Yeah.
We took them. It was really good. Great research, Colby. Super fun, as usual.
I'm trying to think if there's announcements this for summer. We got tours. Lots of tours.
So many tours. Come on the tours.
Get on the tours.
It's sunny.
That wraps up today's Bellinghistory about tattoos. We hope you enjoyed it. And with that, we'll say goodbye for now until next time. And don't forget, we'll be back every third Thursday with new episodes. And I don't know what's coming next.
You'll be surprised. Yay!
Well, hey there, mama, where'd you go? You gotta reap just what you sow. That's too bad. Too bad. To that old time, the old man hates without bad weather. Put on the side, they were sewn together. That's too bad. To listen to that old time music.
Thank you all for listening to Bellinghistory with the Good Time Girls. You can check out our show notes at bellinghistory.com. You can also follow us on all of the social medias. We have links to those on our website. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platforms.
Most of the time, looking so blue. That's too bad. To listen to that old time music. I lost my hat, I lost my brim, I look like crows just swinging on a limb. That's too bad. To listen to that old time music.
And as always, we'd like to thank Devin Champlin and the late great Lucas Hicks for the use of the Gallus Brothers song Too Bad West Coast Blues. You can find the Gallus Brothers and Devin Champlin tunes on Bandcamp, and you can find Devin at Champlin Guitars in Bellingham.
Lost my hat, lost my brim, looking like a crow's nest swinging from a limb. That's too bad, too bad. Well, I got no bugging, I got no smokes. I look like Grandpap and all of his folks. That's too bad. To listen to that old time music.
Tune in next time for more Belling
History.
Ugh.